You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Now, sort of television and showbiz royalty at You Cannot Be Serious we're about to speak to. This man is a screenwriter, has been a screenwriter, a playwright, newspaper and magazine journalist, a composer, a lyricist, a producer, a TV personality, a talkback radio star, an actor, all that, a raft of great talent, this man, and he is the famous, infamous John Michael Howson.
Hello, Sam.
It's fantastic to see you.
Well, it's lovely being alive.
It is. I've known of you for many years, all my career, and I've met you probably once or twice, but
we've met more than once or twice.
Well, I don't think we've ever worked together.
We're Melbourne people.
We are, Melbourne.
Keep circulating in the wide rings of people, you know, in theatre lobbies, in receptions and wherever.
You are the epitome of a Melbourne person, an Australian person. In fact, you are an OAM.
I am. Yes,
yeah, for your services. Absolutely.
I'm very, very. When you're rewarded by your country, it's a very special thing.
It is indeed. In 2009, you were made an OAM.
Yep.
And I also, just trying to read a little about you, you are a dual American and Australian citizen.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, I really let the Americans thing slide. But when I was in America, I went for various jobs, and it was necessary to have American citizenship. So I got it, and now I don't care about it. I'm sort of let it slide.
So you still have it?
I'm an Australian citizen. I'm very proud of being an Australian. And my ancestors on one side of the family came here in the 1820s, which makes me a really old Australian.
Yeah. Well, now I'm a bit the same as me, but you're far more famous.
It's a wonderful country, you know, Australia. When we came back from America in the early 24, I thought I'd landed in paradise. And I said, you know, we are so lucky, we are so free of the stresses of many countries. We had, at that time, the Prime Minister was John Howard, who I was at a North Melbourne breakfast, and he came up and talked to me and to my friend Alfie Duran. And Alfie, who just recently arrived in Australia, couldn't believe that within a couple of weeks of arriving here, the Prime Minister was talking to him. So I just was absolutely mad about the country. I saw it through new eyes, you know, and said, this is a wonderful place to live. Isn't it a great country? And I've seen it go downhill ever since.
I was just going to say, I
shouldn't have said it. I brought a curse on it because ever since then we've gone down the gurgler.
Well, it's just activists have got hold of it, and it's changing by the minute. John Michael.
By the minute.
That's
and not for the better.
Well, so some would say it is, but people who've been here.
If you live in what I call Little Leningrad, which is the trendy suburbs for the academics and the
social elites
and the arts crowd, then you're going to think you're in paradise. But for the rest of us who live in the real world, we think it's turned into hell in a handbasket.
Now, look, I read about all those things that you've done, and you came from Mildura and went to Melbourne, then you went over to London to write sketches and comedic
I did,
script.
But that was a sideline, Sam. Actually, I went over there to get a job, and I got a job at a fashion magazine. And the reason I got the job at the fashion magazine was because the editor said to me, you know why you got the job? I said, why? Because he said, you look like $1 million. He said, all the other applicants look like they'd got a grand bag of clothes. He said, you came in looking stylish and enthusiastic.
And you wrote for a fashion magazine
fashion magazine.
Just about, not GQ Quarterly
or trendy things.
Yeah.
And I used to go to the fashion fairs in Milan and in Holland, and it's quite marvellous to get into the rag trade behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I met a lot of the top designers of the time because a lot of the women's fashion designers were realising they couldn't live on haute couture anymore. They had to expand, so they went into ready-to-wear for women and to menswear. So you started getting Pierre Cardin and Hardy Amy's and people like that going into menswear.
Well,
and that's what I used to cover.
Well, that's extraordinary you say that, because I saw this on Netflix, a film called Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris.
Exactly, and one of my favourite films.
I had no idea what it was. I thought, I'll have a look at this, and I thought, that's exactly what you said about, I don't know what...
It was a Dior, and
they said, you better diversify, and the bloke said, no, we're sticking to making...
They all had to, because the haute couture frock was something like, a $30,000 dress. Well, it was the diminishing market at that time, and they said, we've got to go into ready-to-wear, and we have to go into menswear. And the menswear stuff was interesting, but what it afforded me was a champagne life on a beer income. Because I was being flown around Europe to all these various fashion shows, staying in top hotels, meeting the top designers. It was wonderful life, I've got to tell you.
And then you got on to flying around the world for a different reason. You became John Michael Hollywood Howson. We'll get onto that. We'll just get onto that in a minute.
Yeah.
Because I just wanted before... So you started writing, did you not?
Sketches.
Sketches for that was the week that was in 1964. I remember that show. Like you'd have to be around for as long as us. David Frost.
I moonlighted writing sketches for comedians, and they'd pay you £5 or a pound if you were lucky.
Where did you get your comedic bent from? Did you just come off the top of your head, or
there were a lot of little revue theatres in Melbourne, all forgotten now, like the Arts Theatre and the Arlen Theatre, and they were around Richmond, South Yarra, St Kilda, and they used to do monthly turnaround review.
Yep.
And you had people like Mary Hardy in them, and Joy Westmore.
Yep.
And all the people
I
that
know
went
them.
on to quite big careers. We did weekly sketches, and a writer at the time, Freddie Parsons, who wrote for Graham, said to me, if you can't get 2 funny sketches out of a newspaper every day, you'll never be a comedy writer. So I still look at the newspaper and say, that'd make a funny sketch, that'd make a funny sketch.
So, but you had to have a very good eye for being resourceful and doing that, because people it's not as easy as people think.
No, comedy is difficult. You have to, the funny part about it, you finish up laughing at your own jokes to get the timing right.
Yeah.
That's so very important. And I was, when I went to England, I thought, well, I've got to earn a good wage to live, but I'll do sideline sketch writing. And I used to go up to comics I'd see in pubs and things and give them lines.
Did you?
They'd pay a quid or 10 bob or something, which was great. And then I wrote some stuff for David Frost.
So did you have anything to do with Frost, like personally?
Yes, I did. And the wonderful thing about David, or Sir David as he became, he never forgot a face. And years later, he would come up to me and say, hello, John Michael, how are you?
Yeah, good.
I mean, I think that's class.
Yep, it is.
I really think that's class. He never forgot. And I was so thrilled. I mean, I felt very honoured that he remembered me. But he was a very smart man.
Yep.
Not beloved in the entertainment business because he was super successful and wanted to do and did everything terrifically.
Yeah, a bit supercilious, a bit superior, was he, or not?
I think people that were a bit envious of him thought that, They thought that he was...
I hope you can hear that thumping going through the microphone. So just some people upstairs. We'll just go and see what that is.
That's all right.
So...
Gives me rhythm.
No, we've turned that down. It's just interrupting my train of thought. It's like R.G. Barker who shouted at someone who had a baby while he was doing a review in the comedy theatre the other day.
I don't blame him.
No, we said exactly the same thing.
I don't blame him. See, people don't understand it. Up there on that stage, it's a lonely world. And you have to put all your resources into your timing and your delivery. You can't be distracted by a squealing kid. I'm glad the lady has a baby. hope she's very happy life. But you don't take a child to a comedy show in the middle of the night.
We said exactly the same in the previous segment we did. Now John Michael, you were there at the beginning of ATV Channel O.
That's right.
Now Channel 10, of course, out in Nunawading.
Yes, Nunawading.
Nunawading.
As we used to say.
And you wrote for another legend of the screen, Ray Taylor.
Oh, you remember Ray Taylor?
Yeah, I remember them all, mate.
Ray Taylor was one of the most brilliant men I've ever met in my life.
Was he?
And he went on. How it all happened is I went to Channel 10. Or Channel O.
Yep.
They were just opening.
Yeah, they were.
And I went up and said, having my experience in England and also before that in Australia, I said, do you need anybody to write comedy stuff? And I don't think they knew, from my experience with them, they didn't know what side of the road they were walking on. And when somebody came in with a bit of bravado and said, give me a job, they gave me the job.
Yeah.
And it was to do this late night talk show.
Phil Gibbs there, was he there then?
Who?
Philip Gibbs? Oh,
No,
he did sport. No,
no.
that's right. Yep.
And anyway, I said, no, there was a lovely man that ran the place, Len Major.
Yep.
But his underlings were less than spectacular. Anyway, I got the job writing for Ray because I wanted to do this late night talk show on a Saturday night. The problem was Channel O, only about 3 people could get it.
Yeah, that's right.
It was right
too.
out in the wilderness. But
Yep.
anyway, the show was interesting. But what we did, and it was never heard of in Australia at the time, we actually sent up politicians. And we
Yep.
sent up people of the cloth.
Bit of
We
satire.
sent up, well, of course, people were outraged. How you can't say that about
Yep.
Mr. Bolte. You can't say that about Bob Hawke or whatever, whoever we were sending up. It was all in good humour, but they'd never struck that sort of satirical
No, a bit
comedy.
of satire and parody.
And I was good at that because I'd lived in England where it was, satire was everywhere.
So, John Michael, you can't do that now because
you'd
people
be put on the woke brigade.
You'll be shaming someone for their size, their looks, their race, their whatever.
Ever.
And
I mean, I would have, if I could write today on comedy shows, I would have Chris Bowen. I would have every week a Chris Bowen thing.
Yep.
Because the man is ludicrous. Ludicrous. I think he's got a lot of problems because he comes up with all this stuff, which is laughable, absolutely laughable.
So you must look back, you must be bemused at the fact that you were Fifi Bear
Yes.
in the
what
Magic
happened-
Circle Club.
When Ray Taylor ended, it was.
How long did Ray? How long did he go?
21 weeks, I think we lasted.
Did you?
Yeah.
Ratings, they must have been good, or did they go on ratings then, or did Ray have enough of it? Was he a good man, Ray?
I enjoyed his company tremendously because he was a walking satire. I mean, he just saw everything in a funny light. He was a great conversationalist and fun to be with. Always looked like he was weary.
Yes.
Weary of the world.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Anyway, he went on to the ABC and did breakfast, I think. But when the show ended, I was literally walking out the door with my little box of tricks, and Godfrey Phillip, who was
I know the name.
there, came up to me and said, have you ever thought about writing children's shows? I said, what? He said, well, we're going to do a new children's show, and I think you've got, watching your stuff, there's a sort of element of fantasy in it. And I needed the job, so I said, well, I think I could do that. I didn't. I was absolutely terrified. I didn't know what I was going to do. But I needed the money. And
so you put a bear suit on?
So I started Magic Circle Club and literally sat down at a table with Godfrey.
It was a huge success, wasn't it?
Oh,
from memory?
massive.
I never saw it, but
it changed children's television
It did.
in Australia. And then after about 3 years, Channel 10 had yet another management because they used to change the management nearly every week, and they said, you've got to go. So we were doing our final public appearance thing up in Brisbane, and on the way back on a Convair, remember the Convair?
Yep, I do, yep.
I was sitting next to Liz Teal, who married Mary Teal.
Yep.
And she was in the Magic Circle from time to time, and I said, Liz, I've got an idea for a show. And on the way back between Brisbane and Sydney, I came up with Adventure Island. And
Extraordinary.
Godfrey took it to the ABC, and the ABC loved it, and it ran for 5 years until they had a remanagement of the children's department at the ABC, and they said, no, you're finished. Although we were top rating and hugely successful, and we discovered, of course, that the people running the children's department were terribly jealous that because we were a private company contracted to the ABC. They were terribly jealous that people who were not in the ABC were having a successful show.
Probably still are to this day.
Probably. The ABC is a world unto itself.
Yep.
But the wonderful thing about that, we got politicians' wives of both sides of the aisle writing the ABC, famous people, everybody wrote, so you can't stop this show. But, of course, the ABC doesn't listen to their audience.
They don't have to.
They don't have to. So they just cancel
not
anyway.
Based on ratings or anything. They're based on us paying for it.
That's right.
And so, John Michael, you've got to have a very furtive mind to just write the Adventure Island, to the Magic Circle Club, to do all that stuff with Ray Taylor. And then you went on to even a more controversial show, which was led the field for controversy in its day, the Mavis Bramston show. I remember all these shows. They're just. What did you do for that?
There's a funny story about that. When I came to Melbourne, and I'd been working in Mildura, believe it or not. I'd finished school, boarding school in Western Australia, where my stepfather had pubs. Came over to Mildura because that was a family base. My mother grew up in Mildura. My grandfather had been the editor of the local paper. He was retired, and I came over to Mildura for a holiday before coming to Melbourne. And Grandpa said to me, while you're here, would you like to work at the paper? So I got a job at the Sunraysia Daily paper and stayed there for 3 years, did my cadetship. Then came to Melbourne and got a job at the ABC newsroom, which was hell on earth. And sitting next to me was a chap laughing and writing, and I thought, he must be mad being happy in this place. And his name was David Sale. And David Sale, I said, what are you doing, David? He said, I'm writing a show. Well, I'd never heard anybody say I'm writing a show.
Was that on the ABC, Mavis Bramston?
No,
sorry.
Before. Yep. So David said to me, he was doing a show for the St Martin's Theatre in South Yarra, a review show, and he asked me to write sketches, right? Would I like to? And I did, and the sketches turned out to be that was my baptism into the theatre.
I see.
And then David went on to become the producer of the Mavis Bramston show.
I see.
And chief editor and whatever. So he asked me, he said, you write all this, why don't you write for the Mavis Bramston show? I said, but it's so big time. I mean, it
was
like
big time.
Huge. So I wrote sketches for them, and one of the sketches was the flower arrangement sketch.
I was just going to ask you about that. It says, just was looking at that, and it says the infamous flower arrangement, which was an adaptation of Gordon Chater, or him adapting what. You tell us what it was. I was going to ask you what it was.
You've got to have a fertile mind when you're writing sketches.
Yep.
And there was at the time when they were banning everything. Remember Mr. Arthur Ryler banned books and whatever. Movies were banned, this was banned, that was banned. And I thought, these people see filth in everything. Yep. So I got a flower arrangement from Constance Spry, who 19th century cook and flower arranger, whatever she was. And I took the flower arrangement, and I said, Gordon played a police censor, and he comes home and his wife is reading the Woman's Weekly.
Yeah.
And he said, how could you read that filth? She said, it's the Woman's Weekly. He said, no, it's not filth everywhere. So he reads, look at this, and he reads the flower arrangement, which was exactly as it is. It was a real flower arrangement, but he said, look at this, take the stem and play it. You draw your own conclusion. Yeah. Anyway, he said, see, it's all filth. Well, we just did it like that. And people, now they missed the point, that it was a genuine flower arrangement.
Yep.
But we had people, all sorts of people, politicians, God knows what, saying that was absolute filth. It wasn't. It was a flower arrangement. And they saw it.
As we say, it was a piss take.
They saw it as filth.
Yeah.
Not that it was filth. In fact, it proved my point. Well, I got condemned from the pulpit. I was on the front page of Truth. Filthy show and whatever. Well, we just laughed. We laughed ourselves sick at the fact that people had fallen for this. But it made my name because I was on front page of papers and whatever. Oh. Now, the funny part about that was my aunt, my godmother, said many, many years before, she said, John Michael, if you don't be a good boy, you'll finish up on the pages of Truth. So I was so happy to call her up and say, Auntie Margaret, I'm on the front page of Truth.
Well, I hope your aunt fastened a seatbelt for latter stages of your career, because that became a little more controversial. They said that was a lascivious adaptation by Gordon Chater of the flower arrangement. Funny. Was he?
I called Gordon Charlie Chuckles. He always made me laugh. And I adored him because he was an urbane man. He was a wonderful actor. He was a marvellous comedian. And just a marvellous person to talk to. He was when he retired up to Labrador, which is an odd name on the Gold Coast, Labrador. Yeah. And I called him up one day and said, how are you, Charlie? He said, I'm so happy I don't have to wear shoes and socks.
Well, you've up until we haven't mentioned a lot of them yet, but Gordon Chater, Mavis Bramston's show, Ray Taylor, David Frost, but we get to the probably the main person in all those, in the great Graham Kennedy. You did plenty of
wrote for him
in IMT in Melbourne Tonight.
That's right, and the Graham Kennedy show was more sketch oriented. It was mostly stuff for what followed IMT. They called the Graham Kennedy show. Yes,
that IMT was
the
first.
The wonderful Mike McCall Jones.
Yes, the
who
late.
was Graham's writer, and he passed just recently. Mike taught me a lot.
Yep, and did you have much to do with Graham?
The funny part about Graham, he was very nice to you, but no one could crack the surface.
You're very shy, introverted.
He was very introverted, very private, and kept himself to himself. I don't think, and Bert said that I said to Bert about, he said, I can honestly say I didn't really know him.
No.
Nobody did. He was just this private, the camera, the lights would go out, the cameras would be shut off, and a wall would come down.
Were you intrigued by why he was so successful?
Yes,
because he was successful, wasn't he?
Because you know what he did? We can say it now. He was a gay boy.
Yep.
And he was doing all things that gay boys do at parties. Yep. And he was doing it, and no one had ever seen that before. All the stuff was so, when you look at back now, it's so camp.
Yep.
Really. And he broke down that wall between, they didn't know they were looking at a gay guy jumping around the stove. People just thought it was Lovely Graham. But Graham's family life was strange, He was brought up by his grandma and didn't have much to do with his mum and dad or whatever. It was and I think that he didn't want to be hurt by anybody. He didn't want to have an emotional life. So he was always closer to his dogs than to anybody else.
So I should know, I know him really well, but he's passed on too, but he was great confidant of Graham's in that true sense of the word, the sports journalist from... just a sports journalist, the boy from...
I'm thinking of his... Yes.
Let
it go.
He used to break all the stories and... I'll think of his... How can't I think of his name? He told me all about... He used to go to all those... I was friends of this person.
I've got the name on the tip of my tongue.
Rob Asprey. Holy mackerel.
It.
Well, thanks for that. Fancy me not. So I knew Rob very well, just very well as a friend, and he told me some extraordinary things about the parties you went to with Graham and all that. So I know what you mean about he probably kept that pretty well. Well, he was just a private person.
I like Graham very much, and I used to enjoy talking to him when we did talk. And we had a sort of new people from St Kilda where I grew up, from many years before. So it's so-and-so and tell funny stories. But that's where it ended.
Yep.
He never, you couldn't say he was a friend. You'd say he was
an acquaintance.
Nice acquaintance.
Yep.
Yeah. But he was like that with everybody. People that worked with him for years, like Joy Westmore, who's gone now, and Sue McIntosh, and who else?
The blood. Why can't I think of their names?
Rosie Sturgis.
Yeah.
Rosie never knew him. She said, I don't know Graham. I work with him. Evie
Joff
Hayes.
Joffa? Joff Allen?
I don't know about Joff.
Oh, I don't know.
I know, but I don't.
Yep.
I didn't talk to Joff about Graham, but others I have. And they said we didn't know him. Now Rosie and he were hysterical together.
They were,
you know?
yeah.
And I had dinner one night with Rosie and talking about the match. She said, I don't really know him.
No.
I come in with, hello Graham, hello Rosie. We do the rehearsals, then we do it on the camera, and good night Graham, good night Rosie, and that's it.
No, it's good. And so we just keep mentioning the names. Then Good Morning Australia, Bert Newton. Now he's a good friend of yours.
You know, Bert, of all the people that I've worked with or seen on Australian television that could have been big in the United States, Bert's the only one.
Yep.
I think if Bert had gone to America, he would have had an incredible career because he was so quick off the mark with his comedy, you know.
Yep.
And good looking, charming. I think he would have been a great
articulate,
and informed. And I think he would have been a great American late night host.
So you did Ray Martin, and then you became John Michael Hollywood Howson. You did showbiz gossip, would you say gossip, or just showbiz news? And they sent you, so Ray, how'd you go with Ray? Was Ray an engaging man, or did you just take the money and run?
I didn't really know Ray. But you see how this happened, in between gigs, Mike Walsh was signed to do a
Mike Walsh, yep. Sorry, I missed him.
Tonight Show in Channel 7 Melbourne. And because Gordon French, who was the program manager there, had seen, who was it? Dick Cavett late night show.
I know them all.
He said, I want to do something like that. And I said, I don't think that'll work in Australia. And he said, no, we'll give it a go. So, all right. They did, and it didn't work. It was a good show that was just not to the Australian style. But it was a good show. And Mike asked we knew each other vaguely.
So you were John Michael Hollywood Howson for Mike Walsh, were you? Not for Ray Martin?
No, Ray came after Mike.
Yes, that's right.
What happened was he asked me if I'd write the show, and work out the questions of the celebrities that were going to be on, and it was a marvellous list of celebrities, and it was a great show that nobody looked at. Anyway, I did this show for Mike, and then this was at Channel 7, then that folded. He went off to England, and I don't know what I did at the time, stuff, and then he came back from England, signed by Channel 10 to do a midday show. And the first person he called was me, will you come on my show with me? Because he knew I could fill up an hour chatting if there was nothing was happening.
How long did you do Mike Walsh at midday for?
Oh, years, because it went on to 9 and I followed him to 9.
Yeah.
And we had lots of fun and lots of laughs. And I discovered Jeannie Little because I was sitting in one day for Mike. He was taking a day off. And the crew, the producers had said, Mike, we've got this funny lady from Paddington. You've got to have her on the show. And he said, I don't know. So they thought they'd sneak her in when he was away. Yeah. And she came on and she was pregnant. I think about 22 months.
We spoke to her daughter, who she must have been pregnant with. She came on, You Cannot Be Serious,
last year.
She was
having Katie.
Yep.
So she came on and she thought I was Mike Walsh.
That's correct.
And I thought she was a man in drag.
That is absolutely correct. Her daughter told us that. That is correct. Isn't that extraordinary?
It was so funny. Anyway, we became firm friends. And I adored Jeannie, who was a very smart lady.
Yep.
People always thought that, no. That's Jeannie. Underneath all of that, Jeannie was a very smart lady. and I loved her to death. She was just wonderful. And so I was on Mike's show, and then what happened, it was an accident. They were making a Bond movie somewhere or other, and United Artists that did the Bond movies called me up and said, would you like to go on the set of a Bond movie? And I thought they were going in Sydney. I said, they're making one in Sydney. I said, no, this is in wherever it was.
Yeah, in the Bahamas or somewhere.
Egypt.
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 Yeah.
And so the next thing, I'm flown over to do the thing, and I met Roger Moore, who I knew for years. What a lovely man.
What did you do on the Bond movie? What was it called?
Oh, Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were you on the Bond movie?
I was doing the interviews with everybody.
Were you?
He had asked me to cover the, so I did Roger and Barbara Bach, who's now Lady Star, Ringo Starr.
Ringo, she is too.
And whoever else was in the... Oh, and I also met a lovely lady who had a bit part in it. Now, what was it? The first name was Cassie. I can't remember the second. And she said, one day my husband will be James Bond. He'd make a fabulous James Bond and whatever. She was from Australia, from Adelaide. And I said, oh, really? What's your husband's name? She said, well, no one's heard of him. He's an Irish actor. His name's Pierce Brosnan.
God stroke me, yeah.
She said that, and I told Pierce later, and he teared up.
Did he?
He teared up when I said, Cassie always said you'd make a wonderful James Bond, and of course he did.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of film history. So then I did that so well that every James Bond film from then on, they asked me to cover, and they'd fly me to wherever in the world, to Brazil, to France, to Mexico, to wherever, and I would do the interviews with the...
And who was good and who wasn't?
To Italy for Cortina, always the Bond girl.
Were they good, all good, or some of them dickwits?
Well, a lot of them couldn't act their way out of a paper
bag,
but they were beautiful, you see. And also another job was that they had Bond girl contests in Melbourne and Sydney, one of the city papers, and the winner would go over and have a walk-on in the Bond movie.
Yep.
So they said, will you escort these young lady to the Bond movie? So I finished up taking these dames. They're lovely girls, but, just won this contest. Of course, were plummeted in this absolute whirlpool of publicity and media and everything, and was stars for like 5.5 minutes, and then came back to Australia. But it was wonderful being with them.
So John Michael Howson, Bert Newton, Mike Walsh, Ray Martin, Graham Kennedy, Mavis Bramston Show, Ray Taylor, David Frost. The list goes on as the hits go on. You amongst your many credits are Alvin Rides Again, Power Without Glory.
You know about that.
Frank Hardy.
Yeah.
Power Without Glory.
He wrote that. Well, Frank Hardy was Mary Hardy's brother.
I know that.
And he lived above he was a mad punter, and he lived above a fish shop in Manly. They never had any money. He had Alan Hardy, his son, who became a writer-producer, and Mariska Hardy is Alan's daughter. I don't know how he feels about that. But anyway, and Shirley Hardy was Frank's daughter. I love Shirley. I taught her to swim. And Frank was a communist, you see, but he only knew rich people. He could afford to be a communist because he was always rich people. And one day I was in St. Paul-de-Vence in France, and which is the south of France, the most wonderful place, marvellous place. And I'm walking past a restaurant, and I just glanced in, and there was Frank sitting with Simon Signoret and Yves Montand. So he saw me, and much to his credit, he got up and dragged me into the restaurant, introduced me to Simon Signoret and Yves Montand. Anyway, later on, this was a time, one of the Cannes film festivals that I went to, I went to 23 Oscars and umpteen Cannes festivals. Anyway, later on at some event, I said, Frank, are you still a communist? All said, yes, I'm still, I said, well, isn't it funny? The only people I see you with are wealthy people, stars, fabulous yachts, marvellous restaurants.
Yeah.
I said, you can afford to be a communist.
One of the famous for one of his great lines, which I think I still remember, was I'm not sure if it was Power Without Glory, but he said he cocked his head to one side in a ridiculous endeavour to lend intelligence to a face that bore distinct signs of imbecility. Don't know why I ever remembered that, but
what a wonderful quote.
Yeah. No, I was going to mention. So you did, and the reason I'm mentioning this because I'm going to mention another big name, but you did. Norman, is that you?
I adapted it from an American play, which had moderate success in America, and Malcolm Cook, who was and Ken Brodziak.
Yeah, I know all those names. Yeah.
And Malcolm said to me, "Can you adapt it to Australia?"
What was that about, Norman? Is that
Norman
you?
Well, it's a very funny play actually. It's about a gay boy that living in Sydney with his drag queen boyfriend.
Yep.
And his mother leaves his father, who has a dry cleaning shop in Wagga, and she nicks off with his FJ Holden with a bloke, the local butcher, to Sydney to see Norman. And the husband's furious, not that she's left him, but she's taken his FJ Holden. So he follows in hot pursuit, and they all land up in an apartment in King's Cross. Where's Norman, his boyfriend, the mother, not the mother's love, you don't see him, and the father, and a prostitute. It's a very complicated play, but very, very, very funny.
So, John Michael, the reason I mentioned that is because it says, I think did you adapt or did you write a song for Bobby Lim to sing a song?
I did.
It says you did.
So long ago,
yes,
50 years.
So Bobby Lim and Dawn Lake.
We became friends when we toured the show. I was doing a daytime show for Malcolm, so on the same circuit as Bobby and Dawn. So we got together, quite a lot.
It's an extraordinary list. I mean, I know all these people. I grew up with watching all those people, and unless you...
Well, they were all lovely. Sam, in all my career, which has been pretty long, if you added when I was not getting paid, but just writing for shows and things, reviews, the late 50s until now, I've only met about 3 people I wasn't mad about. I've been lovely. Everybody's been nice.
Yeah.
Lovely people.
Who haven't you been mad about, John Michael?
It's a few, only 1 or 2 in Australia, but a couple in Hollywood I wasn't mad about.
No. Now, so then you seem to a bit like, wouldn't be comparing myself to you, but you got a bit cantankerous, and then you couldn't put up with fools easily, and then you got under it. Did Ernie Sigley? Did he sack you, or did
no,
I got sacked 3 times by Ernie Sigley?
I tell you, poor Ernie.
Ernie sacked me 3 times.
When we were on, he sacked you 3 times.
He sacked. I was on his show I was on 3AW twice with him, and he sacked me twice, and he sacked me on his show on Channel 9.
Well, you see, Ernie and I could be magic on radio together. But Ernie worked under the theory that everybody was trying to get his job. And I said to him, Ernie, I don't want your job. Stop, manipulating things that somehow...
Yep.
I don't want it. Now, is that clear about it?
He wasn't confident with... Even though he was a star, he wasn't confident with who he was.
Well, you see, he relied so much on his producers to feed him questions.
He did. He did that at AW. It sounded as though he knew everything about everything.
I have to say, that's not being cruel, but it was a minimal talent. But but you see, we collected. What was great, that thing, the boy from Footscray and the little Aussie battler.
That's right, the little
Aussie battling millionaire, I used to call him. Anyway, because how much money did he have? A fortune. Anyway, I liked him when we were working together, and it was working. It was fun. But then he would do turn on you.
Yeah.
And turn on. He was just very difficult, cantankerous man.
He was. I used to do the sport on 3AW with him, and he said one day that so and so earned $80 million playing sport. I said to him, he didn't earn $80 million playing sport. He earned $4 million playing sport, and the rest was sponsorships and promote. And he said. And he got really annoyed at that, and he sacked me. He said, Steve Price said to me, "Do you like doing any show?" I said, "What are you saying to me?" He said, "Well, do you want to keep coming in?" I said, "Mate, if you want me to keep coming in," or he said, "Why don't you give it a rest?" I said, "He don't want me to come in." He said, "Well, you chipped him about." I said, "I didn't chip him. I told him he was wrong." Which he was. And then I came back with him, and he sacked me again. He sacked me off Denise. Him and Ding Dong on Channel 9, their show on there. I was doing the VFL, it was then, the sport, and I said something about one of the players, and I said, "No, he didn't do that at all," and he said, and that was the end of that. There, he didn't like you.
Well, you see, he wasn't. I don't think he ever read a newspaper. I don't think he knew what was going on. You know, it was. Look, funny, but I liked him, but I didn't like him. You know that strange thing?
So you had an illustrious departure, if you like, from 3AW, which you came on to be to do what you're meant to be, a little controversial, a little edgy.
Yes,
and that's what they asked you to do. That's why they pay you the big bucks. And then I think you and Nick McCallum, I don't know. I'm not sure it was over. I'm not sure what it was over, but you would have no regrets.
Well, I'll tell you, I loved working with Nick. We didn't agree on anything.
Yep.
But I liked work because he is a very nice man.
Yep.
And our politics are miles apart. And except for currently he's pro-nuclear and so am I. So that we would agree on that. But he was to the left of centre and I'm to the right of centre, but that made good debate on radio. Now, when they hired me, I went in one day by accident. They asked me to come in and do something, and it worked. And then they needed a replacement. I don't know who was leaving, somebody, and Darren James went to the manager and said, "Why don't you get John Michael in?" He said, "Look, he'll do it. He'll be able to do it." So they invited me in to do the show with Nick McCallum Sunday mornings. I did it for about 13 or 14 years or something, and it rated its socks off. It was so successful. Now, they'd hired me to be controversial, and every time there was some controversy, the management always said, "You're great today, that was good today, oh, terrific." They loved it because people were listening. You see, people, if they're going to complain, it's because they're listening. If they're not, nobody complains, nobody's listening. Nope. Anyway, it was very successful. So one day I went on air and I said there was the demonstration of the day somewhere or other, as there is in Melbourne. I said, "Aren't you sick of people demonstrating?" I said, "I wish they'd just jump in the lake." Jump in the lake. I didn't say drown. Yep. I said jump in the lake. And the next thing, I'm told that I was advocating suicide.
Yeah, no, it's just...
And I said, "What?"
Nah, it's good, isn't it?
They said, "Oh, we've had a lot of complaints." I said, "That's good if the people are complaining. That's what they're listening." "Oh, no. It went on. I said, "You know what? I've stayed too long. It's fair." And I never went back.
No, that's it. And you got no regrets?
No.
Now,
when it gets to that stage, when you don't have sympathetic management, if the management's there to really hate you or criticise you, you don't belong there. It's better to go. And look, Sam, I'm a recluse now almost because I had a stroke and it's hard for me to get around. But I haven't lost my marbles.
No, you have not.
Which is a blessing. Yeah. But I'm happy in my own company and happy with my opinions. If nobody else likes that, tough.
We love it. Now, so I'm a heterosexual and you're not
Well, I'm post-gay.
I'm only just saying this because this is well documented. So did you find that hard to...
Never in my life.
Never found it hard to say that you were...
Never in my life.
Do you call yourself gay? What do you call yourself?
I am now what we call post-gay.
Post-gay?
Because the gay world as it exists today, I don't understand it.
Yep.
I don't know what they're talking about with this... what do they call it?
Trans and bisexuals and...
thing and well, I think all that
and gender neutral and
stuff, rubbish. And what do they say? Cis.
Yes, cis. That's right. That's
or
it.
Binary.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're talking about.
Non-binary.
In
that's
fact,
right.
A friend of mine was at a cafeteria, was about to pay his bill, and the person behind the counter said, "Are you binary or you?"
Yeah,
and he
that's
said,
it.
"What? Are you binary?" He said, "No, I'm just an old queen trying to pay me bill."
Oh, beautiful. So,
I'm post gay.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in what I'm not interested in gay parades.
Yeah, no, good on you.
I battle my own battles when I had my battles to win. Now, when I was 17, I was reading a book by Gore Vidal called The City and the Pillar.
Yeah.
And there was gay characters in it. It was outrageous at the time. Oh, my God, a book about gay people. And I was reading it, I was 17, and I was fairly articulate and fairly bright at school, and I thought, one of the characters, I think I'm like him.
Yep.
You know, and that was I never felt guilt. I never felt shame. I never wanted to punish myself.
No.
And I just lived my life, which was not an outrageous life. I mean, I wasn't getting into drag. I wasn't cavorting around. Yep. I was a very quiet, hard-working young man.
Yep.
And gay on the side. So it wasn't that important.
That was from early age? You never went out with women of any sort?
Yes, I fell in love several times.
Did you?
But you see, I think that's the problem. Now, of course, people do everything they want to do. But it'd be very offensive to a woman to marry her knowing you had a secret life.
Yep.
Whatever.
No, well done.
So people do it now, or they have artificial, what do they call them, surrogates and God knows what.
No, good on you. And so you have a partner and you cohabit with?
I have a carer, minder, friend, dear friend.
Yeah, and that's how it should be.
And who I love very much. But the thing about it is that I'm at 88. The last thing I'm interested in now is sex.
Yeah, I know how you feel, John Michael.
I don't care. But I think, I went for an interesting period. See, one of the things that gets me now, I know things were tough in Sydney back in the 50s, the 60s, whatever. I mean, it was a different world. But Melbourne, the cops didn't care about gay people.
No.
As long as they weren't soliciting in certain areas, they really left gay people alone. And you could see that by the number of pubs in downtown Melbourne that used to be packed with gays.
Yep.
You know, like the upstairs bar at the Australia and Fairs Hotel in Collins Street and the Chevron Hotel in St Kilda Road. I mean, they were all gay venues. And then every year they had two very big gay balls at the Palais de Dance.
Yep.
The Advertising Arts Ball and the Theatre Arts Ball.
Yep.
Would everybody know 90% of them were in drag and whatever. You know, they were fun. Nobody was... and Her Majesty's Theatre in South Yarra, which they had midnight screenings of God knows what movie. There weren't that many gay movies around, but they'd put on a Judy Garland movie or something and they turned up in their thousands. But I never felt persecuted or that I had to live in the shadows, and I was never guilt-ridden.
No.
And I think the funny part about all this, though, while I was going through this, I still had an abiding faith.
Yep.
And I think, and I still do, and I have no worries about having.
All you got to do is satisfy yourself with your own God,
exactly. And
so
I think that's it strengthens you. It's knowing that you're cared for by
So
heavenly creatures, shall we say.
this is completely out of left field. So a man got 3 weeks in the AFL for calling another man on the football field. He called him a faggot. Would you think?
Well, I don't think it's a nice word for anyone to use, but at the same time, I would have said the man who it was directed, I would have said, sticks and stones break your bones, names will never hurt you. My mother said that to me many, many years ago. She said, it doesn't matter what they call you, love.
No, it's just...
Sticks and stones will break your bones, names will... But now, of course, people are in the offence industry.
Wow.
Everybody wants to be offended. They're
that's
offended.
Right.
You know, you wouldn't give people the time of day because you might offend them.
I've said this before. They're going to have an Olympic gold medal given to those who can be the most offended and the most outraged.
See, I've never. People have said horrible things to me over the years. Not many. But I've had a few things directed at me. I couldn't care less.
Yeah,
not going to change my life one iota. I'm not going to go home and cry into my pillow.
I'll tell you what.
But I don't use those terrible racist terms against anybody.
No.
And I never have and I never would. I don't care what colour you are. I don't care what gender you are, what sex you are, whatever you are, what religion. It doesn't worry me. That is your person.
Yep.
And I think it's horrible. People who make racist comments are horrible people.
Yep.
But it's not going to change you. You're not going to turn white because somebody called you the N-word. I mean, so live with it.
So, John Michael Howson, OAM, you are a genuine legend of Australian...
From your lips to God's ears.
No, you are. You're a genuine legend of the media and celebrity status, and it's so good of you to come in and have a chat to us.
Well,
and
lovely, Sammy.
I know, and I've heard of every single person you've mentioned on this, the producers, the people behind the scenes, the stars, and so it's great for me for you to actually have known them and worked with them, and I really appreciate you coming in.
Well, that's nice of you, Sam. I've had a wonderful life. I'd regret few little regrets, but not many. And I was so privileged to live the life of I was a movie fan when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And to suddenly be in Hollywood mixing with stars that I thought were legends was more than I could have dreamed of.
Good on you, John Michael Howson.
Thanks.